Everyone thinks they know how the Civil War ended. Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox, Lincoln freed the slaves, America reunited, done. But here's what they don't teach you. The North almost lost. 3 times. And if it wasn't for one general who everyone called a drunk, one impossible charge that should have failed, and one absolutely insane decision to burn an entire state to the ground, the Confederacy would still exist today. This is the Civil War you've never heard, the one where America barely survived. Here's what nobody tells you about the Civil War. It wasn't inevitable. For decades, America kept kicking the slavery problem down the road like a grenade with a broken pin. Missouri Compromise, Compromise of 1850, each one just adding more tape to a bomb that everyone knew would eventually explode. By 1860, America was basically 2 countries wearing the same flag. Up north, factories, railroads, immigrant workers building a future. Down south, 4 million enslaved people producing the cotton that powered the global economy. And every single time a new territory wanted to join the Union, the same question tore Congress apart: free state or slave state? Because whoever controlled more states controlled everything: the laws, the courts, the future of America itself. Then Abraham Lincoln got elected. Lincoln wasn't your typical politician, born in a 1-room Kentucky log cabin, mother dead at 9, less than a year of formal education. But this guy taught himself law by candlelight after full days of splitting rails. They called him Honest Abe because he once walked miles to return 6 cents he'd accidentally overcharged a customer. 6 cents. But here's why the South panicked. Lincoln opposed slavery's expansion. And when he won the presidency without a single Southern electoral vote, the message was crystal clear. The South no longer had a say in America's direction. South Carolina didn't even wait for the inauguration. They seceded. Within weeks, 6 more states followed, forming the Confederate States of America. Lincoln faced an impossible choice with Fort Sumter, a Union fort now sitting in Confederate territory. Send supplies and look like an aggressor, abandon it and look weak. So he tried threading the needle. He'd send food only, no weapons, no reinforcements, just bread. The Confederacy's response: 34 hours of cannon fire. The Civil War had begun. Here's the thing. Both sides thought this would be over in weeks. When Union forces marched toward Virginia, Washington, D.C. citizens literally packed picnic baskets and rode out in carriages to watch the battle like it was a sporting event. Then the Battle of Bull Run happened. At first, the Union pushed the Confederates back. Victory seemed certain, until Confederate General Thomas Jackson arrived with reinforcements and held the line so firmly that another officer shouted, "There stands Jackson like a stone wall." The nickname stuck: Stonewall Jackson. The Confederates counterattacked, the Union line broke, and suddenly those same civilians who came to watch were fleeing in panic, their carriages tangled with retreating soldiers in absolute chaos. The picnic was over. The real war was just beginning. Now let's look at the generals. Ulysses S. Grant. While the Union struggled to find leadership, a quiet, cigar-smoking general named Ulysses S. Grant was winning battles in Tennessee. When Confederate forces asked for surrender terms, Grant's response became legendary. No terms except unconditional and immediate surrender. Translation: I'm not here to negotiate. At Shiloh, Grant faced a surprise Confederate attack that nearly destroyed his army. But he didn't retreat. He brought in reinforcements overnight and counterattacked at dawn. The Confederates were the ones who fled. The cost? 23,000 casualties, more than every previous American war combined. Meanwhile, the Confederacy had their own military genius: Robert E. Lee, West Point graduate, Mexican-American war hero. And here's the twist: Lincoln actually offered Lee command of the Union Army. Lee refused, not because he supported slavery. He actually called it a moral and political evil. But when Virginia seceded, Lee chose his home state over his country. The Confederacy just gained one of history's greatest tactical minds. Now let's look at the bloodiest day. By 1862, Lincoln desperately needed a commander for his main army. Enter General George McClellan. Brilliant, confident, and convinced he was Napoleon reincarnated. McClellan's fatal flaw? He refused to attack unless conditions were perfect. Lincoln eventually sent him a sarcastic note. "If you don't want to use the army, I'd like to borrow it for a while." McClellan finally launched an offensive towards Richmond. He got so close his soldiers could hear church bells ringing in the Confederate capital. Then Robert E. Lee took command of the Confederate Army and absolutely hammered him back. Riding high from victory, Lee made a bold move. Invade the North. Take the war to Union territory. Then fate intervened in the most absurd way possible. A Union soldier found a copy of Lee's battle plan wrapped around cigars at an abandoned Confederate campsite. McClellan literally held Lee's entire strategy in his hands. September 17th, 1862. Antietam, the bloodiest single day in American history. Union soldiers charged into a cornfield and met a wall of rifle fire. Men fell in such numbers that a soldier later said you could walk from one end of the field to the other without touching the ground. Then the fighting moved to Bloody Lane, a sunken road where Confederates fired upward at charging Union troops. Eventually, Union forces flanked the position and fired down into the trapped men below, bodies stacked 3 deep. By sunset, 23,000 casualties in one day. Technically a draw, but Lee retreated back to Virginia, and Lincoln finally had his moment. 5 days later, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. All enslaved people in Confederate territory are, and henceforward, shall be free. It didn't free anyone immediately, but it changed everything. Nearly 200,000 black men enlisted to fight for their freedom. Neither Britain nor France could no longer support the Confederacy without openly defending slavery. And the war was no longer just about preserving the Union, it was about ending slavery forever. July 1863, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Robert E. Lee marched 75,000 men north for one final decisive invasion. Lincoln gave commands to General George Meade just 3 days before the battle. Day 1, Confederates took the high ground. Day 2, Lee attacked both Union flanks. At Little Round Top, Colonel Joshua Chamberlain's regiment ran out of ammunition. His solution? Order a bayonet charge downhill. Against all odds, it worked. The Union line held. Day 3, Lee made his fatal mistake. He ordered an artillery bombardment, the largest in Western Hemisphere history. Then 12,000 Confederate soldiers emerged from the smoke for Pickett's charge, a mile-long march across open ground towards the center of the Union line. Union rifles tore them apart. A few hundred Confederates actually reached the Union position. General Lewis Armistead placed his hand on a Union cannon and shouted for his men to turn the guns around. Then he looked behind him. He was alone. Every other soldier was dead or retreating. Armistead fell. Pickett's charge failed. Of 12,000 men who started that march, fewer than half returned uninjured. Lee rode out to meet the survivors with tears streaming down his face. "It's all my fault," he whispered. 50,000 total casualties, the deadliest battle of the war. The Confederacy would never invade the North again.
By 1864, Lincoln finally promoted Ulysses S. Grant to command all Union armies. Grant's strategy was brutally simple. I'm going to wear Lee down until he has nothing left. In Virginia, Grant fought Lee through the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor, each battle costing thousands of lives. Other Union generals had retreated after facing Lee. Grant just kept attacking, kept marching south, kept grinding the Confederate army down. Northern newspapers called him the Butcher. Lincoln's response, "I can't spare this man. He fights." Meanwhile, in Georgia, General William Sherman had his own approach, total war. Sherman's philosophy, war is cruelty. There's no use trying to reform it. The crueler it is, the sooner it'll be over. After capturing Atlanta in September 1864, Sherman proposed something radical: march to the Atlantic coast and destroy everything of military value along the way. "I can make Georgia howl," he told Grant. Grant approved. Sherman set Atlanta ablaze and began his march to the sea. 60,000 soldiers moving in 2 columns 60 miles wide. They ripped up railroads, burned factories, and liberated thousands of enslaved people who joined the march singing songs of freedom. By the time Sherman reached Savannah, he carved a 300-mile path of destruction through the heart of the Confederacy. His telegram to Lincoln: "I beg to present you as a Christmas gift the city of Savannah, April 14, 1865, Ford's Theater, Washington, D.C." Abraham Lincoln sat in the presidential box watching a play. 5 days earlier, Lee had surrendered. The war was won, the Union was saved, 4 million people were free. Then, Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth slipped into the box and shot Lincoln in the back of the head. Lincoln died the next morning. The man who guided America through its darkest hour, who preserved the Union and struck down slavery, died before he could see the peace he'd fought so hard to achieve. The final count? 600,000 Americans dead, more casualties than all other American wars combined until Vietnam. The United States survived, but barely, and from its ashes, America was given a second chance to live up to its founding principle that all men are created equal. The Civil War didn't just change America, it defined what America would become. But Lincoln's assassination, that altered everything that came after.